This episode of Profiles in Risk is sponsored by IA Path, unlocking your adjusting superpowers. Go to iapath.com.
This is Profiles in Risk. Hosted by Nick Lamparelli. Every week, we interview those who risk life, limb, fortunes, career, and reputation, and those who work behind the scenes who look to protect and enlighten us about risk. You can find the show notes and other insurance-related content at insnerds.com. That's insnerds.com. Now, on to the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Profiles in Risk. I'm your host, Nick Lamparelli. On this wonderful Thursday evening, I am so pleased to introduce Craig Tappel. Craig leads Hub's property and casualty practice in Tennessee. He is responsible for all market relationships, program design, strategy, negotiation of coverage terms and pricing, and tailoring risk management solutions for each customer. Craig, welcome to Profiles in Risk.
Well, thank you, Nick. Thank you for inviting me to the show. I've been following Insurance Nerds and your podcast and the great things that you're doing to attract people and convince people that insurance is a fun job. It's an exciting place to be, not only today, but in the future. And I like what you're doing.
Well, it's an honor. We spoke beforehand, and you're good friends with Bill Wilson, and we were talking about the insurance scene in Nashville, and I'm sure we're going to get all into that. So I'm honored to have you on and for you to say those things with the type of career you had. We're loving it. We're trying our best, and having people like you on only helps increase the message. So thank you again. Craig, I gave a description of you, but I always try to start each of these podcasts. I give my guests a little forum to describe who they are and what they do. So Craig, what do you do in your own words?
I do two things. First is trying to put the insurance expertise on the customer side. And the second thing is try to attract new people to the insurance industry and develop them into insurance professionals. That's part of the fun of learning all that we do. So practicing in the insurance industry is passing on what we have learned.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It's one of the reasons I like Bill Wilson and that crew, because they are very much like that. They dedicated to passing on what they've learned.
Yeah, it's such an interesting industry because young folks don't really understand it because they're not exposed to it. They're exposed. They probably get exposed to like finance and banking and a lot of other industries, and things that they study in school probably fits some kind of long-term plan for what it is that they're trying to do. But most people that are young don't have any exposure to insurance until they buy a car. And even then, they may not even have direct access to the insurance. They may be probably on their parents' plan. So it's a labor of love, right? Like for us, trying to explain that it's not a bunch of old white men sitting around a mahogany table making decisions, that when you break it out, what we're going to get into with what you do, but just, all of the different sectors and silos that exist in insurance, it's actually quite interesting. So I'm especially pleased with like what you do, because you've had a wide breadth of background in insurance. You've bounced around geographically. So you've seen a lot of the country, especially in the South, and especially in your role now with Hub, that it seems as though like you have a lot on your plate. Could we go into first, before we get into that, could we go into how you got into insurance, and then we can kind of walk through your career up to the present point?
Yes. So like a lot of people, I was born into the insurance industry, into an insurance family. My father was in the insurance business, but that's not what attracted me to it. My father looked like he was having a lot of fun. He looked like he was challenged every day. The learning about our business and people, trying to keep the insurance contracts straight, earning trust is still the best part of what we do.
What was it that your dad did?
He was an insurance and risk management consultant, an independent consultant. He represented customers to the insurance marketplace.
Okay.
trying to really put that was one of his slogans, was putting the insurance expertise on the customer side, sitting in their shoes, spending a lot of time understanding their business, and then taking that knowledge, their understanding of risk, their profile for risk, and taking that to the marketplace and say, okay, now that I know about your business, now that I know about you, let's see what we can do about insurance.
Okay, so what was your first job?
So it was with my dad. He really started me out in high school. I think I started going on customer visits when I was 13 years old.
Okay. Wow.
And then probably went to the London market. First visit was probably around 16. He installed a fax machine in my college room. So all the way through really high school, through college, and then for several years, probably 8-10 years after college, was really where most people get to finish their career as an independent risk management consultant or just consulting in any role. I got to start there. So that was a blast. It was fun. It was what still excites me about insurance today is getting to those decision makers instead of starting at the bottom and working my way up. I got to, in a lot of ways, start at the top.
Considering that you've touched a lot of different aspects of insurance throughout your career, what part of it do you enjoy the most?
Spending time with customers. I enjoy spending time with customers, and they need to trust somebody. Just like their accounting, their legal issues, their insurance, and their risk management program are just as complex as those other issues. They need an advisor who is just as dedicated, who is just as qualified, and who they can trust as a single point of contact. They don't want to read insurance contracts. They don't want to understand the insurance markets, but they need to find somebody who they can trust with that responsibility. I love doing that.
Yeah, so there was a very interesting conversation that was going on the Insurance Nerds LinkedIn channel. Stephen Gordon, who's someone that I've interviewed, so by the time the listeners are listening to this one, the Stephen Gordon broadcast will already be out. I interviewed him, and I interviewed Patrick Muscienti, who's a producer at an agency in Cleveland, and they were kind of going back and forth in a really interesting way about the industry and about sales and about trust. And the whole point, I think what it came down to was they talked about how they would gladly sacrifice a lot of the quick sales aspect that a lot of people are really shooting for to develop a better and more deep, meaningful relationship with their potential customer. They would sacrifice the sale to spend more time with the customer, to really know them better and understand them better, because they feel as though in the long run, it's just a more fruitful position for everybody to be in. There's a lot more trust. It sounds as though what you're describing and what the thing that you like the most sounds very similar to that particular conversation that we were having today.
So the more time you spend with a customer, the longer your relationship is going to last. So if you do the homework on the front end and earn that trust, you keep a customer for a long time. If all you bring them is a price and that's all they see, and they see you show up for 10 minutes and leave, then it's just as easy for somebody else to come in there. It's easy for a bot or a computer to come in and do that. The next salesman will be by soon. So if you want to have that trusted advisor role, you got to invest in it. And I've trained a lot of producers. I've had the opportunity to spend time in 100 different agencies. When I was on the underwriting side, I was marketing to a group of agencies in several states, and have stood in 100 different insurance agencies' offices, probably 100, maybe 150 in 3 different states, and worked in a couple of different agencies and seen that there's lots of really qualified people out there. There's a lot of people who care about their customers, who are spending the time, investing the time. And those are the guys who have these big book of business. They're the ones who've been in it for 20 years. They're the ones who are struggling to find out how to pass their books on. So there's people out there who are doing it. There are people out there who have that drive, that force, that the same thing that I see that draws me to the industry. I see that all over the place. They're out there. It's not just Bill. It's not just you. And not just me, it really is an industry of people who care.
Yeah, yeah. At what point in your early career did you focus on excellence? Did you realize this is not just a job, this is a career, and I'm going to completely dedicate myself? Do you remember when that moment occurred?
It was when I was in my second senior year of college. Everybody needs a 5-year plan to get out of college. But I really spent some time studying the London market, some of the asbestos cases, some of the LMX spiral that was out there, and really was fascinated about how complex it was, how big it was, and how much there was to learn. At one point I thought I was going to write something great on the London insurance market, and found out how little I really knew. And as I got more into different parts of insurance, I learned a lot more as I earned the CPCU and other designations. But more than they taught me a lot, they taught me how much I did not know, and how much I needed other experts to help me, and how big the insurance industry was. So when I saw that and saying, this is an industry that will never let me be bored unless I choose to be bored. If I'm really trying to keep track of customers as they're changing, the opportunity to walk around people who are making ships and manufacturing products and dealing with animals and healthcare companies and touring facilities of customers, and then trying to understand all these different contracts that are from many different carriers and markets, and they're all in different forms. Some of them are standard, some of them are not. Attorneys struggle reading these forms. I just said, oh my gosh, I will never be bored if I jump into this industry. It continues to change. It's super challenging. It's like a puzzle you can never solve.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned the London market a couple times. That was the trigger for me, was when I got a personalized tour of Lloyd's. Listeners to this podcast knows that I probably wasn't secure in my feelings towards insurance until I got more on the analytical side. And even then I thought I would still kind of use the analytics to do more financial stuff than insurance stuff. But once I got a tour of Lloyd's, I was hooked. It was just there's just so much history, and I got to talk to so many interesting people doing like space and energy and all of these cool things. It was exactly the way you described it, Craig. It was I can if I really focus on and develop an expertise, I can never be bored, because if I'm bored, I can just hop over to some other new area within the industry and rekindle the flame, so to speak.
And we'll get right back to this episode right after a brief message from our sponsor. I am back with Chris Stanley, founder of IAPath. Chris, IAPath can handle individual as well as corporate adjuster trainings. What is the typical class size?
Nick, with the technology that exists for hosting classes online, we can hold hundreds of students per class. But at IAPath, we wanted it to be more personable. If we're going to sign off saying a student is competent, then we need to actually get to know the student. And we can't get to know the student if there are hundreds of people per class. That's why we keep our classes to under 20 registered students. And our certified partners are confident that we know the student and that student knows their stuff.
Learn to write auto, heavy truck, and other claims types with IAPath's online trainings. Unlock your adjusting superpowers. Go to iapath.com.
I probably wasn't secure in my feelings towards insurance until I got more on the analytical side. And even then I thought I would still kind of use the analytics to do more financial stuff than insurance stuff. But once I got a tour of Lloyd's, I was hooked. It was just there's just so much history, and I got to talk to so many interesting people doing like space and energy and all of these cool things. It was exactly the way you described it, Craig. It was if I really focus on and develop an expertise, I can never be bored, because if I'm bored, I can just hop over to some other new area within the industry and rekindle the flame, so to speak.
So that box, if you've seen a Lloyd's box or you've been in other parts of the London market, they have always brought together, and it's one of the reasons I think the London market has continued to survive, and it will continue to survive for a while, as long as they continue to bring all the decision makers to one room. You have underwriters, a lot of time you have claims people, you may have analytical people, and you've got some access to data. And the broker was always expected to bring everything that an underwriter would need to know about an account, and bring all those things together at one point in time where a person could make a decision. And if you watch those decisions go through, and one guy would line up in the broker line, and when he got his turn, he had all his information together. He might spend 5 minutes talking about an account. Now, the problem with the insurance industry was it took 2 months for it to get there. But once all that information arrived in that room or at that table, all the pieces were there to make a decision, and they did. The underwriter would look at an account for 5 minutes, make a decision, price it, gone, and the broker go on to the next account. You watch a guy standing at a underwriter box, and in 15 or 20 minutes go over 5 to 10 accounts. That is, we talk about where the insurance industry is exciting, where it should be exciting, where it needs to go is putting those things together. I've got to get all the information that is needed with all the people who need to access and make that decision at the same time. And then they can make a judgment call, price it, make the deal, move forward.
Yeah. So now that
Did you find that exciting?
Yeah, very much. I saw brokers lining up at underwriters' boxes. I would see them sit down. They would hand over a manila folder, but
Mm-hmm.
I saw them going back and forth. Now, I've heard a lot of stories about the London market. I've heard about deals being done in bars and on the back of napkins. That was part of it was exciting too. I heard the stories about how claims written on binders that were signed on the back of napkins were honored. And
Yeah.
I said, what other industry does that? What other industry can you scribble something on the back of a napkin and the person says, "I signed it." I'm at the time it was just men, so as a gentleman, it was dishonorable to not take be honest and take pride in that signature in placing the accounts. So it's the opposite of the stereotypes that are out there in the general public.
Right. So when I see the same things when I look at When Worlds Collide. I have my copy of Bill's book on across my office. And when he sees that most insurance adjusters are out there trying to pay claims, and I've stood with many adjusters after Katrina looking at commercial property or dealing with customers, most of them are really there to try to help. We're all there trying to fulfill the promise of making that insurance contract do what it's supposed to do. If people gave us money and their trust, we're supposed to show up after the hurricane, after the accident, after the fire, after the boat sinks, and take care of them, put them back where they're supposed to be. My son made me stand up after Katrina in front of a kindergarten class, and it was career day. And I literally was standing next to a pilot, somebody who had helped rebuild the levees in New Orleans, and me, standing side by side. So I'm the insurance guy with these two other exciting professions. And I really struggled with, what do I say that I do? And I came up with, I take care of people after bad things happen. I help them get back to work. I help them put their homes and their businesses back together. I help businesses have confidence to go forward and not be so worried and sleep at night. That's what I do. And I have this fun job that I'm never bored. I've literally toured this kind of facility and that one, and talked to people about loss control things and how to keep people from getting hurt. The best insurance contract is the one that never pays a claim because nobody got hurt. Because we got out there with services, we got out there and helped people. The second best thing it does is if somebody gets hurt, to take care of them. But when we can get all the way up to the level of knowing somebody's business, knowing about them, getting in front of things, and do the things that the insurance industry does on the safety side to keep people from getting injured in the first place. For me, that's why I see insurance premiums been falling for 10 years, not just because of markets, but it's because we're doing a good job. The insurance industry is doing a lot of the good things that it's supposed to do, not just taking care of people after, but helping to lower claims in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's really good. That's a public good.
Yeah. No
Makes
kidding.
me feel good about my job.
Yeah. And that must have been quite a sight at that career day, wondering what it was you're going to say. Hey, I'm an insurance guy. That probably wouldn't have gone over very well, but what an insurance guy is, what you described.
So those pictures of the bad loss control behavior. So the guy with the ladder in the pool changing a light bulb, or the supervisor looking over a guy's shoulder with no protective equipment. I also use that slideshow. It really helped. They remembered the slideshow as much as anything.
Oh, that's fantastic. So what in your career, what has been the most, what has kind of stuck out as the most striking thing that you remember out of all the things that you've done? When or where or what kind of registers with you as the thing that kind of sticks out as like either the most shocking or just what's your biggest remembrance of your insurance specific career?
After Katrina, I was sitting with a customer in New Orleans, and our team was on one side of the table. It was a large real estate account, and the insurance adjusters from a very large, well-known insurance company were on the other side. And so we were looking out the window over their heads, and it was at Lee Circle, which is in downtown New Orleans. And over the top of their heads on a billboard was the words from an local attorney that said, "Have you been screwed by your insurance company?" And it was sitting on top of the adjusters' heads the whole time we were talking. And I was really thinking about the way that was contrasting, because these guys really were trying to take care of us. We actually settled that claim that day. We moved forward. We had almost $60 million worth of flooded and wind damaged property overall that had to be put back in place. Almost all the locations were rebuilt. The company did a great job. But so I'm looking at these guys do this behavior and behave correctly. And on top of their heads, I am reading the words, "Have you been screwed by your insurance company? Don't you want to sue them?" And that just keeps coming back to me.
Yeah.
Of the perception versus the reality. It goes very much with our conversation. Don't you do flood coverage?
I do.
So have you had a similar experience with, there were a lot of flood claims from Katrina and in New Jersey, as far as the delivery and the action, the reality versus the perception. Did you see the same thing?
Yeah, well, we're new in writing flood, but I was with a large carrier and with a large broker during Sandy, and I lived in New York City during Sandy. And one thing sort of stuck out during the last company I worked at. As the hurricane, I forget which hurricane, it was after Sandy, but something was making landfall, and I saw an email go out, and it was basically from the CEO, and it was his point was, we want these claims paid as quickly as possible and as fairly as possible. And what specifically stuck out was, if there is a gray area, lean towards the side of the customer. Settle that claim in their favor if there's a gray area. And that stuck out. Like, here's the CEO of a global insurance company, and he's just saying, be fair, be fast, let's get this over with. But don't step in any dog poo. Just do the right thing for the customer. So let's just, we have so many claims, we have to do this quickly. So when these kinds of things happen, just do the right thing. And I've seen that over and over again. That's kind of what sticks out to me when those kinds of things happen. And so, reading Bill's book and just I read the Rough Notes magazine every time it comes out. I always feel like when there's a media story about a denied claim, there's three sides to every story. There's the insured side, there's the insurer side, and then there's probably the truth, and it can get kind of messed up. And sure, I think there's a lot of times where there are claims that you read it and it's just like, oh, why did the insurance company deny this claim? That's like really petty. But there's probably another story behind it. There's probably something specific that forced them to kind of dig their heels in. So I try not to judge, because I've seen so many positive things that carriers have done from both the brokerage side and on the carrier side, that I'm not saying I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, but I just feel like claim settlement's so complicated that if it does go to some kind of litigation, there's something special about it.
Yeah. So most of the time, and I've been involved in a lot of claim disputes, and the first thing that we do is, if an adjuster or a company has taken a position that something's not covered, was go read the policy and then read all the circumstances of the claim, and then say, is all this matching up? We know this. If we know this policy was meant to cover a situation like this, what's missing? And if we approach it that way and read through the policy, sometimes talk to other professionals, and whether in our office or outside our office, and there's a path to coverage, and there's a clear path to coverage, and you call the adjuster with that information, say, I'd really like you to look at this. Here's how I see this policy. Here's how I see this claim, and this is why I think it's covered. And you give them a logical basis to pay a claim. Very seldom do I see an adjuster not do it. So if you can help them connect the dots, and they're not experts on reading insurance contracts, and they may not have all the information from the customer. So if you can help them draw a path with information and with the coverage forms, they will go with you because they want to, in most cases.
Yeah.
And
I think there's a life lesson there, though, right? Or a business lesson. What you just described reminded me of a recording I did with Lisa Miller, who used to be in the OIR in Florida. And we talked about how, when carriers, for instance, bring forms or rates to the regulators, there's almost like an adversarial relationship immediately. And she's like, it doesn't have to be that way. Ask them out for coffee, talk to them. And what you just described is almost the same way. It's like, if you call these people and you treat them with respect and you rationalize with them, it's not like you're currying favor. It's just, you can hit the spot that you need to hit to persuade them to your side of the argument. If you do anything other than that, if you call them up and you seem shady or you're belligerent, how are you supposed to win that? You're basically pushing it into something that's going to be more combative.
Yeah. And I've had discussions with customers too. As an agent, in many cases, or as a consultant, I was in the capacity of I'm supposed to be the conscientious advocate of my customer. So I'm supposed to try to see things their way. But often after I look at a claim and after I look at the policy forms, I call my customer and say, look, this probably isn't covered, or it's not covered for as much as you think it is, or the business income portion of your claim is not going to be adjusted that way. And trying to set expectations for them. In many cases, they're reaching to try to recover some loss, but in a lot of cases, they know they didn't buy it, or they know it's not covered. So I also find, a customer's trying to push, they're trying to get something covered, they want it covered, but sometimes when they push, they also know it's not covered because they either chose not to purchase the coverage, they chose to buy less, or they know it's an uncovered situation.
Well, that makes me very curious in your position, given how, I guess, how much effort you put in developing the relationship and providing that, being that trusted advisor. Flood, we brought that up. 90% of properties in the United States don't have flood insurance. I don't know if you saw the videos of Elliott City, Maryland. And
I did not.
Okay, so I'll share that on the show notes. But Elliott City, Maryland, just had their second "quote unquote" 1 in 1,000 year flood in less than 3 years, and the video is just amazing. But I think what was more amazing, I don't think what people really saw, was that Elliott City is on the side of a hill. It's not like the water filled up from the bottom up. The water was coming from the top down. So my feeling with flood is if it can rain, water can get into your house. How do you, Craig, talk about flood with your customers? Given that 90% of properties in the United States don't buy the coverage, it's likely that, I doubt Hub or any other brokerage that you've worked for would have statistics that are probably too dissimilar. That's one issue where I see over and over again. We saw it with Harvey, where the majority of the flooding occurred to people that were outside the flood zone. They didn't buy coverage, and now the customer's pissed off, and they're pointing the finger at everybody, the real estate agent, the broker, everyone's to blame because they didn't buy flood. How do you personally deal with a customer that's saying, I live up on a hill, I'm not going to buy flood? What are your feelings regarding that peril?
I use some examples of some flood claims that have applied to condominiums that have been several stories up. I certainly have used my own decision to buy flood insurance or not. Before Katrina, I was using those examples, and we were in New Orleans, so we were sending out flood letters every 2 to 3 years, reminding everyone that, hey, we have flood available. It's probably excluded from your property policy, or in many cases we were pointing out it is excluded, and saying, don't you want to look at this? And in many cases they were not buying it. But I would try to say, this is how my decision works. This is how a claim works. Now, post-Katrina, there were a lot of people outside of flood zones in New Orleans who could stand on the front porch of their house and see a levee that was less than 200 feet away, because they were behind the levee protection. There's water everywhere in South Louisiana, and there was no requirement to buy it. But that levee might just fail someday. So regardless of whether I was on a hill or I've never purchased a house that was below sea level, even though I was in New Orleans. Now I live on a hill. I'm about to buy a house in 2 weeks here in Tennessee. It's going to be on a hill. It's not in the flood zone. I can see down. I think the church next door would have to get 20 feet of water in it, but I'm probably going to buy flood. So because there's other things it can cover, there are other circumstances, and including if the earth moves from water or a mud event. So it's trying to take them through more of a personal experience, maybe a couple claims examples, and even New Orleans, because in South Louisiana, where a lot of people weren't covered because they didn't think they needed it, because some document told them they didn't, but they live right next to water. It's almost, the water's right there. It could come over at any time, but some people just won't buy it. I've won many of those arguments, but I've lost an awful lot of them.
Yeah, it's such a big problem to solve. I think this is a good segue to go into your experience with program business, and I'm going to spend probably the latter part of the podcast talking about technology and how that's going to affect what you do day to day. But let's segue to programs and then technology. On the program side of things, to me, that's where like the rubber hits the road. That's like, especially with what we're talking about now. We brought up before about how the best insurance policy is the one that's never used. And I've made the argument that the alignment of interest is there between an insured and an insurer. No one really wants a claim. I think the conflict comes in the fact that because neither one of them wants a claim, there are a lot of risk management stuff that can be done to mitigate claims. My feeling is a lot of the conflict is with the who's going to finance that risk management, who's going to pay to lower claims. and keep lowering them as technology keeps improving. And so I feel like the insurance program market is like the right incubator, the right area to test a lot of these ideas. So I want to get your feelings on insurance programs. I've read, I've read in some areas that like the MGA market and the program market is like old school type of insurance. How do you see the insurance program market, and what do you see as the future of it?
So the insurance program market, the best case scenario is where you're taking somebody who has deep expertise and a lot of knowledge about an industry. They know those customers, they know what they need, and they've built a specialized product for them. So they have set themselves out as experts in that industry. That's why a carrier is setting them up as sort of an independent insurance company operation, and it is to use that expertise to price things effectively, to grow the market, to control losses. I think that is a key part of, just like you don't necessarily need to be a generalist in any business. Specializing in the insurance business, whether you're in sales or in underwriting or in the role of an MGA or a program underwriter, is to specialize, to know people's business, and to be in the best position to help them. So if you have a loss control person, you want somebody who walks into your facility or is talking to your people who truly understands your business. They know what worked at a similar business that's 500 miles away and 3,000 miles away. So they can give you things that have really worked in other places. They can provide information sharing across your own industry. It's best practices is what they can bring to you. From the underwriting side, they know what it takes to be profitable. They can stay in the market for a long time. If they bring that knowledge and price things effectively and they are profitable, the insurance business is going to keep them running for a long period of time. So it's that specialty on underwriting, loss control, and claims. So when an adjuster works on your claim after the fact, when they're supposed to be delivering on that promise, they understand your business. How the business flows through, the cash that comes through, the type of customers you have, the type of facilities, the type of equipment. They're able to adjust the claims faster. It all works better when we specialize. So I think the program market, the MGAs, are just a key part of that.
Yes. How do you think that technology will affect that part of it? I'll be honest. I've had conversations with folks that aren't in insurance, but that are in more of the venture capital field out in Silicon Valley, doing their InsurTech thing, and they look at the insurance ecosystem stack, and they just say, I don't see the value of these guys. Or I don't see the value of those guys, or like we should be like cutting them out. And I've heard VCs say, who are these people? Like, why can't we just form a carrier and just do that and just kick them out and make sure we're keeping those expenses and sharing those with the customers? How do you think technology is going to affect the program business going in the future?
So it takes fewer people, and should be able to get to those decision makers faster. So this is not the first time that computers have tried to replace insurance intermediaries or underwriters. 30 years ago, there was a London market system that was supposed to replace the London brokers and replace some of the London underwriters. We weren't going to need boxes anymore. It was going to all be on the system. I think it worked for cargo insurance only. There was SIMC, which was single entry, multiple carrier interface. We were probably talking about that 20 years ago. There have been exchanges. We've had uploads, downloads from carrier systems or other integrations. So it's trying to find that magic one format that gets that only the information and as much information as that person needs. But there's still a judgment piece in here. There's still understanding someone's business. And as long as business keeps changing, as long as financial markets keep changing and what can happen in a claim or creative products are out there, there'll be some judgment required. And that's the part you're not going to be able to turn into a bot. So as long as there's that judgment factor, we're going to need people to do that. Now, I've also known people who were in the insurance business who were, for lack of better words, is glorified fax machine or glorified paper pusher. So if all you do as an insurance intermediary or a representative is take information the customer fills out for you on the application they complete completely by themselves, and you hand it to an insurance company, and then you just wait, and they give it back to you, and you give that exact document to the customer, or you do that as a broker. If all you are is a middle machine and you do add no value to the process, well, you can be removed, and that value can be given back to the customer. A computer can do it. We don't need you if you're not adding value, you're not adding judgment, and you're not taking those extra steps to be an expert.
So what about bots? You brought that up. They've become, I wouldn't say ubiquitous, but almost all of the digital native players that have come in via InsurTech are using bots in a variety of ways. I think even for Lemonade, I'm not even sure you can call them. I think they're almost all of their mundane tasks are being handled by bots, and I think upwards of 30% of their claims are being handled by bots. So that kind of gets into what you're saying, but I think there's a big fear in a lot of the industry that trend is just going to keep continuing. I get the sense from your feeling that because of the judgment element of insurance, that won't happen. But how do you see the technology playing out in traditional insurance and the kind of like the Uber commoditization of auto and homeowners and renters and small business? Where are we going with this, and where does it stop if it does?
So I don't think it's going to stop. I think it's going to continue going. I think it's going to continue to be a larger part of our world, and we have to accept that and find the places that we can add value. So the things that we do, they're just truly automated, and we're doing the same thing over and over again, or we're filling out the same applications over again. Some of the applications that we do, some of the accords, they look very much like they did 30 years ago. And underwriters have come up with supplements because a lot of them don't look at those anymore. They look at their supplements now, but we still fill out the other form.
It's crazy.
Where we don't necessarily need to. We're still completing. There are right now online, you can verify somebody's insurance coverage with NCCI. Anybody, anywhere, if they're in an NCCI state, you can check if they have comp. Why can't we do that on other lines instead of having insurance certificates? We have some customers who are sending out thousands of insurance certificates, and whether it's in paper or by mail or by email, it's still a picture in time that can't be verified. There's got to be better. There are better ways. And when you look at some of the things that blockchain could do, that it's an account verification, or that what you say is in place is really there and several people will verify it, there is a place for that. And I don't need to pay somebody necessarily to type out 500 insurance certificates. When we look at insurance policies, and we issue insurance policies that have a basic contract, and then there's endorsements that delete part of that contract, but they don't. Nowhere in that other contract does it say, "Don't read this paragraph." You can skip this paragraph because later in an endorsement, we overwrite this entire thing. So I think there has to be a better way to read them, even if it, because there's legal precedence, because customers need to know, insurance companies need to be able to price coverage. So they need a dependable contract to do that. Customers need to be able to expect that their claims will be paid, and they need that contract to be consistent. They need precedence for that, because most of the time the claims are paid. But there has to be a better way to read this document. If you've ever sat down with an attorney and who is used to reading a normal contract, and they change those contracts and they're very complex, and they get extremely frustrated trying to read an insurance contract, they will tell you no other contract is put together this way, or where there's nothing shown to strike something out if it's totally deleted later. I've read insurance policies that were 20 pages long, and then the endorsement that came right after that deleted the prior 20 pages and replaced them with a 20-page endorsement. So if you started reading that policy from front to back, you read 20 pages of stuff that were completely deleted. And we're giving that to our customers and then wondering why they're confused.
Yeah.
And wondering why they hate their insurance policies. There's got to be a better way.
So what do you see as someone that prides themselves on forming these deep relationships with their customers and being on their side? How do you plan on using technology to assist you or make you stronger?
Well, where I used to have shelves of reference books or need people to help me research things, I have more information at my fingertips every year than I did the year before, and it continues to escalate. So the ability to reach out to markets, to find out what they need from a coverage point of view, to match up an insurance carrier to them, or even to do research on my customer for information they're having trouble getting. I have so much at my fingertips these days. It's great. So I just feel like I have a lot more resources than I used to if I'm willing to look at them. There's on my computer, if you've had Silver Plume or different products where you have insurance manuals, they're great. They're all computerized. We don't have those things on our shelf. But I think people read them much less than they used to. There's a lot of good information in there. Information that could help you develop yourself as an expert, information that could help your customers. But I think by getting digitized, they're easier to get, but less people are using them. They're used much less now.
That is amazing.
Than when they were on the shelf.
Yeah, that's an amazing side effect of digitization. Is you almost take it for granted. I miss my paperback books. When I go to Kindle, I'll buy a whole bunch, but I don't read them in the same way I read my paperback books because it's just a completely different experience. I almost feel like, well, if I need, and I read predominantly nonfiction, but if I need to know something, I can use the Kindle and just search and go look it up. I don't have to go through that same experience. It's quite an interesting side effect to the lifestyle that we're now living.
Yeah. So when I I've had the opportunity to train a lot of new producers, a lot of new people to the insurance business, and just they want the answers very quick. And I, in many cases, either print the manual pages for them, I print policies. One of the things my father did when I first started out was he made me read insurance policies. He would not talk to me about them until I read them cover to cover and tried to figure out what I thought they said. And then he would tell me what they really said and how wrong I was. So when I've trained in new people in insurance, when I've trained producers and led classes, whether internally for the organizations I've worked for, I start by making them read the insurance policies. And then I ask them what they think it says. And then I talk to them about how that works with real claim examples and how the information flows through the policy and how the endorsements work. But we start by, take out manual pages and I force them to go through those resources to get them accustomed to what Bill Wilson would call RTFP, read the policy.
Yeah.
That is when a claim happens, when bad things happen, when it's time to deliver on what you promised by selling this thing to the customer, that everybody takes out that document. And you have to be able to read it. The adjuster's going to read it. If it goes to litigation, the attorneys are going to read it. You have to be that expert who can read that thing and has spent the time, because if you wait till after the claim and you've never picked it up before, it's very difficult to get through. It's the first time you open a CGL policy and read it for trying to understand it comprehensively is after your customer has a horrible claim. You're not going to be able to help them very well.
Mm-hmm. I can concur with that. That's the wrong time for sure. Mm-hmm. So besides reading a policy, what other advice would you give to a young professional that's coming into the industry?
So continue to always focus on the customer, learn your craft, and that includes professional designations. get out there, let your customers know that you've met the industry standard, that your industry has come out and judged you to be worthy to call yourself an insurance expert. Meet that standard, get there. And then be active in the insurance community, because none of us know it all. And none of us have all the connections. And I have friends that I call from all over the country, and they call me and I say, I've got an account that looks like this, and I just don't know what to do. Can you help me? Or what would you do in this situation? Anybody that I know who's been in this industry for 20 years and really holds themselves out as somebody who has a lot of insurance knowledge has at least 5 friends that they call regularly for help. And they are active in their community, and they've got that network of people to bounce ideas on. Because since you can't know it all, the only way to really help your customer is to have a community of people around you that can help you do it.
I love that. That's great advice. I want to respect your time and finish off the remainder of the recording to get a little bit more personal, so people know a little bit more about you. Craig, when you aren't working, what do you enjoy doing?
I love hanging out with my kids, playing with my kids, cooking, and personally, I love to run and do triathlons and long distance running.
Triathlons. So the whole gamut, is that like Ironman type thing?
So I've done 2 Ironmans, probably 10 or 15 halves, maybe 15 or 20 marathons, and a whole lot of other things. But doing that, of just pushing myself out there to do that, I think that's a lot of fun. Yeah. My wife thinks I'm crazy. But
I think you're crazy too. But it's probably why you enjoy cooking too, is because you need to figure out how to generate enough calories to be able to survive all of it. Craig, what tools or techniques do you use to stay organized and or productive?
So, like everybody else, I live with my phone in my pocket. I live with my iPhone, and everything seems to be on there. But the one thing I carry around a notepad all the time. I always have it on the front of that notepad, and I'm replacing it all the time. I'm adding to it all the time. If I think of something in the middle of the day, I have a list, and it's a handwritten list, and I do cross it out, and I write myself reminders on it. But somewhere with me, no matter where I go on vacation, when I travel for business, I have one page of what I'm supposed to do and what am I doing next.
So have you been ever tempted to use your phone as a task manager?
Yes. So, and I've tried using lists, I've tried using the task functions, and nothing seems to work good as that single piece of paper.
Fair enough. I have my manual calendar next to me, and it's old school, and it just feels better, feels right. So I can respect that.
It works for me, so I use it.
Good. Craig, final question. What books have you found to be influential in both and or your business and or personal lives?
So I'm a biography history nut, so I'm always reading at least one biography. So Churchill and Abe Lincoln, I love those stories. In the car, I'm always playing an audiobook. So when my kids or my wife get in the car, they have to turn off my books. So sometimes I switch between the great lecture series has been great, but also throw in some fiction. I think I listened to the entire Harry Potter series. And so there's always 3 or 4 books going, at least one nonfiction and at least one fiction.
That's fantastic. I'll put all of that on the show notes. And we've come to the end of the recording, Craig. This has been a very pleasant conversation. I have to say I really enjoyed it. Your devotion to your craft and to your customers, it kind of oozes out of your words. I really get the sense you mean what you say.
Well, just to be a part of what you're doing as the Insurance Nerds and the podcast that you're doing, it's a pleasure to be part of it. I think you are helping to attract younger people to the insurance business. And, like I talked about at the beginning, that's one of the things that really fulfills my career. And I feel like y'all are doing that, and anything I can do to be part of that is just wonderful.
We appreciate that. Yeah, we appreciate that so much. My guest this week has been Craig Tappel. Craig, thanks again.
Thank you.